So this is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcasting on Wednesday, the 23rd of August, 2023, under the banner of the BabyAngelGeronimo editions. BabyAngelGeronimo, the alpaca, is the most truthful, reliable, ethical, moral witness, BabyAngelGeronimo, anywhere. And we say that the BabyAngelGeronimo is witnessing, uniquely witnessing, the ongoing running orders active in the main newsrooms, in the mainstream British media outlets, organizations. One of the news items doing the rounds is, of course, the London Metropolitan Police, who, on the evidence being carried by the likes of the London Evening, No Standard, is populated by too many rapists and racists in police force. And the item about Lucy Letby, the mass murderess, is about the Chester Hospital management who aided and abetted her as they protected, as they say, the reputation of the hospital, which would be damaged if they admitted that Lucy Letby was murdering babies. So they allowed her for another year in which to continue to murder the babies, while they allegedly protected the reputation of all countries where they don't know any rules, they don't know any morality, don't have any love for human life. Here was Chester in England, murder babies. The management made demands. Lucy Letby for daring to say that she was a murderer. Now, in the only edition that does appear, the so-called evening standards, which we call the evening no standards. It says West End final. But there is no fucking final. There is only one edition of the fucking evening standard, which is no standard at all. And we shall talk about the fact that it is no standard. But it says West End final. What the fuck? This picture on the front page is the London Metropolitan Police rapist. And they have the question, how many more predators in the Met? And on page 3, there is a picture of the masses of Indians kind of gathering to celebrate the landing of India's craft on the moon. called the moon. It's Chandrayaan 3. Now, this is very good for the ego of the BJP. But the millions that are hungry today, they have been hungry for the last week, for the last month, starving for years. How does this relate to these hungry people? And how can they be expected to understand any point in this wasteful exhibition, which is not a good thing for the environment anyway? But their caption says the students with painted faces surround a replica of an Indian moon rocket in Chennai as the country made a bid to land on the lunar surface today. The Chandrayaan 3 was due to touch down near the moon's south pole at lunchtime today, that is Wednesday, 23rd of August 2023. The spacecraft, whose name means mooncraft in Sanskrit, is India's second attempt to land on the moon. It will hunt for water-based ice, which scientists say could support human habitation there in future. India's bid comes just days after Russia's Luna 25 crashed while trying to touch down in the same region. Now, of course, this means nothing to the zealots that want to promote the image of India. And there is a continuing coverage against Sadiq Khan in the Standard, which is a conservative platform anyway, regardless of policy. And it's byline to what is called a deputy political editor, and the name is Jitendra Joshi. And it says, no way Tories could have used courts to block ULIS, claims Khan. Sadiq Khan today defended his legal right to expand the ultra-low emission zone, defying government threats of action with less than a week to go before the clean air scheme is extended across Greater London. We shall be talking more about the environment and the role of Sadiq Khan as the incumbent in the post of mayor in another edition or in continuing later editions. There is these pages by Rachel Barford, chief political correspondent. This is a stupid piece. What's the point of stripping her of her pension? Will that bring any of the babies back to life? What's the point? This shows the complete unfitness of the UK state, the unfitness in protecting human life. And the Evening Standard has got three editorials. The first one is headed, Londoners no longer surprised at Met failure now. What a stupid headline that as well. There is no outrage. So what's the point of this laid back, stupid headline? The point is that there is no policing. There is no policing at all. Policing has been abolished decades ago. So what there is under the label of policing in London is gangs of criminals operating as police. It's happening right in front of our eyes. Now, the editorial quotes a woman who is described as Assistant Commissioner Louisa Rolfe, who is quoted as saying, she was sure the public will be as shocked and revolted at Provence's offences as we are here in the Met. Really? They're shocked at the Met? Now, the London Victims Commissioner, I didn't know that there was a Victims Commissioner, called Claire Waxman, said, for too long, the processes and culture of the Metropolitan Police protected and enabled predators like him, the latest one that is. The trust between police and citizens cannot be rebuilt until that changes. Now, this is not a question of trust, you fucking morons. This is completely, absolutely irresponsible idiocy. The police are not in place and never have been in place to serve as a public relations extension. The police are there to do the vital job of protecting people, safeguarding people in the particular area, in this case in London, Greater London. So the fact that I didn't hear about Claire Waxman until reading this particular editorial shows the point, makes the point. that even she doesn't exist. And despite the fact that there is a heavy duty attack, party political attack, of course, by the Conservatives on the incumbent mayor, Sadiq Khan, the attack is not about the safety of the people of London, that the Metropolitan Police continuing to ignore, because the Metropolitan Police is not accountable to anyone. And it is deafening the silence of the mayor incumbent, the Sadiq Khan, in the case of London, speaks volumes as well, because Sadiq Khan is supposed to be the head of the London police, the political head of the London police. And he has made no difference whatsoever. The fact that he is in the news, and even with increasing frequency, combative headlines attributed to him based on his spiels against the Conservative government about the ultra emissions zone, shows that Sadiq Khan has got his priorities wrong. If instead of doing the stunt on emissions, Sadiq Khan had concentrated on facing up to the reality of the police, operated a gang of criminals, Sadiq Khan would have doubled, trebled the chances of his electoral kind of credibility increasing against the Conservatives. And there's a picture on page 10 of the Neom Recorder with the heading, we all have a part to play, and it appears to be written by Neom Council with the name of Roxana Fias. And a caption under the picture of bottles and broken glass reads, Roxana Fias is fed up of seeing rubbish on the streets. Well, this is the so-called Neom Recorder. And this is the piece that has got any positive recognition by Roxana Fias of the truth of the filth that Neom Council keeps the borough in. Now, the fortnightly satire magazine, Private Eye, which collectively I call the Private Lie, because it is essentially pack of lies. It's a racist paper. But despite the fact that it is racist and it tells a pack of lies, in comparison with the Fleet Street Dailies and other titles, it contains some, let's say, items that are not in any of the other papers. So to that extent, that is the reason why I refer to the various items in Private Lie. So let's go to page 7, which is to be understood as the main news editorial content page starts, because the other pages are full of advertisements. So this is the heading to the third item of the 4 items on page 7. Blair's baggage. The first item is, of course, about Lucy Letby, which we shall be talking about later. But this one is about Tony Blair already receiving $33 million to his Tony Blair Institute, and another 59 millions. These are donations, apparently. Those 59 millions are pending. Now, why they are called pending is not explained, but that is what the item says. And the money comes from the American tech billionaire Larry Ellison, who is described in the first paragraph as a supporter of Donald Trump. So 59 million and 33 million. It's in the millions, isn't it? It's not like £100 or £1,000 or even £100,000. It's millions. Now the question is, why should anyone donate any money to Tony Blair, who left the post of Prime Minister in 2007 and has got huge sums of money already and has no right to operate as a businessman. So, why is Larry Ellison paying him any amount of money, donating to him? What is this? What is the Tony Blair Institute about? Of course, the private lie doesn't go into that. But the significance of that piece is that even this is a no newspaper, news outlet, including The Guardian, so far anyway, has published anything like that. And by like that, I mean the Donald Trump connection with Tony Blair. Why is it that Tony Blair's connection with Donald Trump and Larry Ellison have not been mentioned in any of the British media until now? Until now, with this private eye piece, which will now be followed by others imitating the private eye piece. Why haven't they mentioned the fact that Tony Blair has been a part of the fascistic right in the American politics for all that time? In fact, when Blair was in actual power, he kind of laid on the ground for everything that George W. Bush wanted to do with his body, with his image, with his name, with his connection. The George W. Bush used Tony Blair to create the facade that there was this alliance against terrorism coming from the Muslim countries. Now, what has happened to that alleged fight against terrorism by the Muslim countries? The only thing that has happened in the last 22 years is the incarceration of thousands of Muslims in the prison space owned by Cuba but controlled by the Americans, Guantanamo Bay. And there has been no evidence. There has been no evidence published anywhere that these people have done anything. This is Blair taking part in the creation of the Guantanamo Bay nightmare and the incarceration of these people, torturing of these people that is continuing. Running under So the only thing they make any mention about, and this must be a piece, another piece, mainly by frantic wine, the frantic swine, the racist Francis swine, anti-Muslim frantic swine. It's a completely timid, idiotic piece. It doesn't go anywhere near the rigorous, factual details about Tony Blair's ongoing criminality and crimes against humanity. Blair is, of course, in alliance with the heavily Western anti-Muslim regime that has existed now in Saudi Arabia increasingly for decades. And the fact that George Galloway, who was supposedly against Tony Blair, the war criminal, and his war crimes, has gone silent as far as the mainstream in Fleet Street is concerned, the media. George Galloway might as well not exist. And politically, George Galloway doesn't exist. Politically, George Galloway really hasn't existed, except as a stooge. Most of his political career has been built on Galloway's ability for a period to kind of create an image that he was supporting the Palestinians or that he was supporting the Pakistanis. Neither of which can be really credited with anything, any real substance. It's like war on want. Galloway was involved notoriously with the alleged anti poverty charity War on Want, where his involvement caused outcry, thus causing him to leave. It was about the same time that Galloway was involved in the kind of British news concerning his boast biography about George Galloway, based on his early years in Dundee, Scotland, where he comes from, contains information that has not been published in the mainstream, by the mainstream in the UK media. One of the most compelling parts of that account is that as a young person, Galloway received attention from women who were interested in having sex with him, and it appears that George Galloway made a big effort to maximize the potential for him to have sex with as many women as possible, and also to use the apparent sexual attraction that he carried about him as a part of a resource for him. As he displayed in January 2006, while he was appearing on the Big Brother house that was being broadcast by Channel 4 at the time, George Galloway is too willing, too ready to submit to sub pornographic, semi pornographic urges, which became clear when he agreed that he pretended to be the cat. And he also pretended to be the pretend cat doing the pretend king of and cream from his mistress, Rula Lenska, on the show. So notorious was George Galloway based on that he will go to his grave and he will never live that down. No matter what else he does, George Galloway achieved the depth of his distortions and perversions and preparedness to be treated as an idiot. He claims he is clever, intelligent, but that whole episode showed him to be the opposite. So outraged were ordinary people in Tower Hamlets in the East End of London that they were prepared to respond to a recall election, to have him removed as Member of Parliament for the constituency of Bethnal Green and Bow. I have said enough times that we stopped it. We stopped it, not him, not the so called Respect Party, not anybody else. It's the Khoodeelaar campaign that stopped it. But because George Galloway is essentially a racist and a racist ingrate, he has not paid the basic acknowledgement to the campaign for saving his political skin and maybe more. In January 2006, at the biggest rally that I addressed at the Brady Centre on the 22nd of January 2006, I was the keynote campaign speaker at that rally. There were people demanding that George Galloway be taken out of the constituency position. It was my decision again to not support that. And the reason in January 2006 for doing that was that in comparison with George Galloway, the crimes of Tony Blair were far greater. And as history will show, the crimes of George Galloway will remain compared to the crimes committed by Tony Blair of a much different order. And this is the proof. This private lie piece today, carrying the item about Larry Ellison, donating to Tony Blair Institute, is the tip of the iceberg because there is a mystery that appears to be unsolvable, but it is not a mystery. Because the reason why Tony Blair has been paid millions and millions of pounds by criminals, warmongers, dictators, and fascists is because he is a seller of state secrets. He, Blair, should be treated like call him simply Brian, and the late Queen Brian's mother was simply called Brenda. Now, Brian has been at the center of a news scandal concerning the Metropolitan Police. The London Metropolitan Police has decided to drop all charges and drop the case that was expected on the evidence until they dropped it to be a credible, indictable offense committed by King Brian's longest running advisor and confidant, aide, a man called Fawcett. And the Daily Mail has got a team of so called investigative writers. One of the most frequently recognized one is called Adam something. I'll come to that in a minute. And Adam usually writes what is called or can be called scathing pieces about corruption in high places. On this one, he tones down or lowers his tone by several inches, if you like, to reduce it to a point where it makes no sense at all. Let's go to the item and checking it. So the guy Adams is the name, this individual. And the heading here is that the dropped cash for honors police probe was a major royal scandal. But King Charles's loyalty to his former top aide, Michael Fawcett, runs deep. Now that gives the answer to the question. And the question is that why did the police drop that case? And the answer is that King Charles's loyalty to his former aide, Michael Fawcett, runs deep, which means that he was the reason why the police dropped it. Why did they drop it? And why was he the reason? The answer is that any investigation Michael Fawcett was up to would have led to him and would have put the spotlight on King Brian, who would have come across as a complete crook. And they cannot have that, can they? A sitting monarch exposed as a crook, beholden to the moneyed Saudi Arabians. And here is a taster of Guy Adams' copy. One day in August 2017, a smart looking envelope dropped through the letterbox of 78 Pall Mall in London's Clubland, an 18th century building converted to an office block in the heart of London's Clubland. It contained a secret message from Michael Fawcett, one of the most senior aides to our then future King Charles, to a Saudi Arabian gentleman by the name of Busif Lamlum. Fawcett, who had signed the headed notepaper by a fountain pen, was confirming details of a highly unorthodox plan to help Lamlun's wealthy boss access the upper echelons of the British establishment. Firstly, Fawcett wrote that he would be willing and happy to support and contribute to an application for citizenship by the man, a Saudi tycoon called Mahfouz Mari Mubarak bin Mahfouz. It is such a loaded name. Let's read it again. A Saudi tycoon called Mahfouz Mare Mubarak bin Mahfouz. Secondly, he continued, that is, Michael Fawcett in his letter dropped at 78 Pall Mall. He, Fawcett, was happy to help Mahfouz, who had recently been made a commander of the British Empire, gain a more exclusive honor. I can't, I can confirm, Fawcett declared, that we are willing to make an application to increase his to that DE. Now, if the Majesty's Honours Committee had any independent teeth, this contradictory sentence could not be written by Michael Fawcett, but he did write that, which means that the Honours Committee is a joke, is a sham, is a dishonorably active operation. So Guy Adams continues. According to the letter, the motivation for the generous royal gesture was quite simple. Notice this. According to the letter that is Michael Fawcett wrote and dropped at 78 Pall Mall in London's Clubland, the motivation for this generous royal gesture, which was being expressed by Charles's long-time aide by Michael Fawcett. So Michael Fawcett was to be interpreted and treated as Charles himself. So reading the Guy Adams paragraph again, according to the letter, the motivation for this generous royal gesture was quite simple. Mahfouz had in recent years pledged vast sums of money, believed to total around 1.5 million, to Charles's various charities, including the Dumfries House Trust, which counted Fawcett as its £85,000 a year chief executive. Now, if somebody from another planet, because the Little Englanders, they don't recognize Asia or Africa as containing people with any morality or any ethics or any values. So it has to be another planet from where any being, if traveling to the planet Earth, brought with them any checklist of morality and ethics. And if they looked at the newspapers of today or of this week, the Tuesday the 22nd or Wednesday the 23rd of August 2023, then they would know for sure that there was no honor, let alone honors. There was no honor in the honors that are being kind of flogged about by either Boris Johnson or by Liz Truss or by Charles, albeit Charles acting as behind the scene through the aide, Michael Fawcett. So the police, the major police force in the United Kingdom, is controlled and populated by rapists. Controlled and populated by rapists and racists. Brian, no less. Lots and lots of cash from to the Saudis. I mean, it's not a secret, it's not being unearthed as a result of years and years of silence. It is being seen, brazenly seen, openly seen. As part of the modus operandi, as experts on criminology would use about crimes and criminals. MO, the particular criminal's MO are all too clear in these set of incidents, for example. Now, what is the mystery about the London Metropolitan Police dropping this? There is no mystery. That is the whole point. Because it is King Brian who, before he became king, was the Prince of Wales while his mother was alive, was being represented by Michael Fawcett with the arrangement, with the suggestion that this Mahfuz would be upgraded to a full scale and the kind of contingent condition implicit in the letter, which was signed in fountain pen by Michael Fawcett, as Guy Adams says, was that more money would be made available to the church for the charities. And all these charities are linked with the king. At that time, he was linked as the Prince of Wales, but he is linked. And Guy Adams also discloses that King Brian is connected with thousands of charities. Let's go into the body of that article by Guy Adams. And the aide, that is Michael Fawcett, in that letter duly praised, within quote, the ongoing and most recent generosity of the Middle Eastern donor, that is Mahfuz, and Michael Fawcett stressed, that both of these applications will be made in response to the most recent and anticipated support of the trust and in connection with Mahfuz's ongoing commitment generally within the United Kingdom. Can you believe the prostitution? The pimping and the prostitution that is going on, the procurement is going on. Fast forward 4 years, and the generosity in question would suddenly ignite most explosive royal scandals of modern times. A copy of that letter by Michael Fawcett, delivered at 78 Pall Mall at the heart of London's Clubland, a copy of that letter was the Mail on Sunday in September 2021, and its publication, which prompted the immediate resignation of Fawcett, not only raised awkward questions over whether Charles was leveraging his royal status for cash, but also sparked claims that his office had been breaking the law. Now remember BabyAngelGeronimo. And remember the three judges that sat separately, allegedly, to objectively, independently look at the evidence, look at the signs in relation to the fascistic campaign by George Eustace and whoever else was making the decisions at DEFRA, the Department for Environmental Protection. They had the agenda right from the beginning of Baby Angel Geronimo's arrival in 2017 from New Zealand, that they would include Baby Angel Geronimo as one of their targets to make a case, make an example of how far they would go to murder an innocent being in order to avoid having to pay millions of pounds that the department owed owners of other innocent animals that had been murdered. That is the reason why, So that is one of the reasons why they never wanted to change the words of lying against baby angel Geronimo. Now remember that was happening with the active complicity and collusion of not one, not two, but as many as three sitting High Court judges. That is not to include other judicial post holders in between. And all these judicial post holders behaved as if the facts they were looking at in front of them, the evidence, the scientific evidence, and the pleadings by baby angel Geronimo's mom, Helen MacDonald, all the evidence that they had in front of them, they pretended not to be seeing the evidence. And as I have said already in previous editions, the latest High Court judge to sit to legitimize, to give a legal rubber stamp to the DEFRA's criminal agenda against baby angel Geronimo was Griffiths. Now, Griffiths sat on the record on the 29th of July 2021. And Griffiths, the liar, said that whatever the evidence, whatever the truth, whatever lies, Griffiths said, the Secretary of State is entitled to ignore all the evidence. Now, that kind of assertion is not only illegal, but it constitutes open conspiracy to commit a major crime. Conspiracy including the High Court judge, who is brazenly undermining the very existence of the court and its jurisdiction. So we go back to Guy Adams's piece about Charles and read this particular paragraph again. A copy of the letter, that is Fawcett's letter delivered at 78 Pall Mall, a copy of the letter was obtained by the Mail on Sunday. In September 2021, its publication, which prompted the immediate resignation of Michael Fawcett, not only raised awkward questions over whether Charles, as Prince of Wales as he then was leveraging his royal status for cash, but also sparked claims that Charles's office had been breaking the law. Now let's go into the details of this word leveraging, just so that there is no uncertainty about the meaning of the word leveraging that Guy Adams is using. The first meaning is the use, the using of borrowed capital for an investment, expecting the profits made to be greater than the interest payable, without clear legal title to their assets, their own property that cannot be leveraged as collateral for loans. So, what Guy Adams's piece is saying about the question about whether Charles was leveraging his office is that he was acting as a pimp for the prostitution of the monarchy to the extent that it could be prostituted. And the second meaning is the use of something to maximum advantage. The organization needs to leverage its key resources. In both meanings and both interpretations of the term leverage that can be found in the use of the word in Guy Adams's piece, Charles does not come across as at all honest, dignified, honorable, moral, and most certainly not ethical. Now, when I say that the High Court Judge Griffiths was a prostitute, what do I mean? I mean that, contrary to the concept of due process and rule of law that have been often cited in selling the idea that the British legal system, the British judiciary, is based on the existence of the rule of law, the existence of due process, and then is based on the upholding of the existing rule of law and the upholding of the existing due process. Now, these were not present in the behavior of either the High Court Judge, Mr. Griffiths, or in the behavior of the other ones. What they said consistently was that it does not matter. Due process doesn't matter. Rule of law doesn't matter. The actual evidence of whether an animal is infected or not doesn't matter. Whether the animal is independently, objectively tested negative doesn't matter. So, this takes us to the highly importantly self promoting weekly called The Economist. The Economist on the current edition, weekly edition, let's look at the summary of what it says on the front page. So, The Economist is saying in the current edition, which carries this item, it's the leader of The Economist. And it says authoritarians are on the march. Remember what I said about Larry Ellison? I said that Larry Ellison, in the context of American politics, has been a fascist and a fascist supporter for a long time. Authoritarians are fascists, dictators. So let's look at The Economist, which is not talking about Larry Ellison because their editorial is somewhat wider than just one particular country, I think. So it says they argue that universal values are the new imperialism imposed on people who want security and stability instead. Here is why they are wrong. This one is dated the 10th of August 2023. So the item is actually on the front page of the front cover of The Economist, that is in the news agents. Today, that is where I saw it. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 held out the promise that growing prosperity would foster freedom and tolerance, which in turn would create more prosperity. Unfortunately, that hope disappointed. Our analysis this week, based on the definitive global survey of social attitudes, that is true because it's much wider than the Larry Ellison and the Trump base of America. It's a global survey of social attitudes showing that just how naive that hope about the Berlin Wall ramifications was. Prosperity certainly rose. In the 3 decades to 2019, global output increased more than fourfold. Roughly 70% of the 2 billion people living in extreme poverty escaped it. But individual freedom and tolerance evolved differently. Many people around the world continue to swear fealty to traditional beliefs, sometimes intolerant ones. And although they are much wealthier these days, they often have an us and them contempt for others. So that is as far as the paywall access to this item would go. To get access to the rest of it, you have to log in, which means you have to pay. That is practically impossible at this moment. So, can we go into the article? And although they are much wealthier these days, they often have an us and them contempt for others. So what's the next paragraph reading? The World Value Survey takes place every 5 years. Well, they're talking about the Economist survey. The latest results, which go up to 2022, canvassed almost 130,000 people in 90 countries. Some places, such as Russia and Georgia, are not becoming more tolerant as they grow, but more tightly bound to traditional religious values instead. At the same time, young people in Islamic and Orthodox countries are barely more individualistic or secular than their elders. By contrast, the young in Northern Europe and America are racing ahead. Countries where burning the Quran is tolerated and those where it is a crime look on each other with growing incomprehension. So let's tell you, whoever you are reading this one, the entire debate on power, morality, ethics, imperialism, racism in the world today, and I mean the world today, is not about space, not about the environment. The debate, the political force of the debate is centering on Islam, as this editorial in the Economist acknowledges. We shall be talking more about this, of course, in other later editions, because to do justice to the concept of universal values, what the Economist is pointing out is that these values are under severe attack. Now, what I have to say, so what I have to say is this, that although the target of the attacks by the imperialists, the racists, the targets are Muslims, the Muslim countries, and I'm talking about the social description of Muslims, not the theological description of Muslims. So, demographic description of Muslims is what I'm talking about. So, the demographic description of Muslims that are clearly at the top of the list of targets as calculated by the Economist. The demographic Muslims are not doing their job. That is what I'm saying. And what I'm saying there is not for the first time. I'm saying it, I've been saying it for as long as I've been examining the evidence. So it's been decades. It's been decades since I began to study the mainly Western produced media, and I predicted things that have happened. It's not a light statement I'm making. For example, the events in the subcontinent that I predicted in the 1960s, including the fact that the 9 questions I put to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the 9 questions that he could not answer, and the 9 questions that forced him to beat a retreat from his meeting with me that was being held at the Institute of Engineers in Dhaka, in East Pakistan in the 1960s. Because the 9 questions that I put to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto were questions based on his ignorance, questions based on his unjustified empirical arrogance. Because although he was a Western, quote, educated academic, at the time he was a teacher at the University of Southampton when the then Pakistan military martial administration had Ayub Khan recruited him and appointed him, Zulfikar Bhutto, as the foreign minister. Although he had that academic kind of record, the actual ability to understand the history of the area that Pakistan was in, say the subcontinent, and consequently the history of the world, showed that Bhutto didn't really have enough knowledge. And what knowledge he did have was incomplete. And what use he had of the power was misplaced. It was absolutely astonishing, but true, that 9 questions I put to him, and not one of those 9 questions did Zulfikar Ali Bhutto challenge. Now that is shocking. That is absolutely shocking because he should have at least tried to understand the actual evidence on which I based my questions, and he should have examined the evidence. But he didn't do that. So he didn't understand, he didn't engage in understanding, and he did not understand. So, based on that, how on earth was a moral question, which is what he was there to address? Moral question about the country that is Pakistan in the 1960s, being abused by the military. What on earth was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto offering to the people of Pakistan who were totally, absolutely in a state of uncertainty, first of all, because of the continuation of the military, and secondly, the absence of an alternative answer that was credible and sustainably representative of the people of the country who had nothing to do with the military, but were ordinarily to be counted and treated as the ordinary demography of any country without the interference of a concentrated command like the military. No ordinary group of people could face the military in any country. So when he was ousted by Ayub Khan, and he set out the plan, obviously, to conquer East Pakistan, he must have considered that he was capable of representing the prospect, the future prospect of the country in a more acceptable way with more substance than anything Sheikh Mujib, the Awami League front person, was capable of representing or promising. And here was his opportunity. There could not have been another individual taken from the population of the all of East Pakistan at that time who was more informed about the country, who was more articulate, and who was more coherent than I was. And if he could not understand and he could not engage with what I was saying, then there was no hope whatsoever of a future in the country with Zulfikar Bhutto as the leader of the country at any stage. We shall be continuing about Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in later editions. I'll come to an end to this edition, which is 1 hour and 1.5 hour. And it's coming to an end at 22:38 hours GMT on Wednesday, 23rd of August 2023.